Well, hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. Bob Bergland is an American bass player, saxophonist, and singer who is a longtime original member of Chicago's Ides of March. In fact, Bob, along with Jim Peterik, lead vocals, lead guitar, Larry Millas, rhythm guitar, bass, and vocals, and Mike Borch, drums and vocals, are all original members and all still playing together in Ides of March. The band started in 1964 in Berwyn, Illinois. An early hit, You Wouldn't Listen, from 1966 gained a lot of airplay, but it was 1970's Vehicle that would put the band on the map. The song was a #1 single on Cashbox and #2 on Billboard, and is still played to this day. The band went on an extended hiatus in 1973, but did return with the original lineup in 1990. To date, there have been 9 studio albums, 2 live albums, and a compilation. 2019's Play On is the band's latest. Well, welcome, Bob.
Hi there, Greg.
Thank you for joining me today and taking time out to visit. Well, take us back to the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Berwyn, Illinois. As were most of the band members. The 3 of us went to the same grade school of the original 4 guys in the band. All 4 of us were in grade school band together, and that's how we met our drummer, Mike. And then between my freshman and sophomore year in high school, Larry called me up. I'd known Larry my entire life, literally. Calls me up and said, "Hey, I'm starting a band. You want to be in the band?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. You got a band." I said, "Who else is in it?" He said, "Well, right now it's just you and me." And I said, "Well, that's not a band. That's a duet." But then we recruited Jim Peterik and Mike Borch, and then we had the foursome, and we took it from there. Started the band in '64.
Okay. Well, going back just a little bit, do you remember early on at your house hearing music played in the household growing up?
Of course I do.
Yeah.
My not that I'm an opera lover at all, but my father on Sunday afternoons would be down in the basement working at his workshop and listening to the Met on the radio. And he belonged to the Columbia Record Club, if you remember those days, where they sign you up, and for a penny you could get 12 albums or something.
Right.
And so he signed up for that, and he loved classical music, but he let me pick albums too. And so during that era, this was in the folk music scene and scare of the 1960s. I was into everybody from the Kingston Trio to Peter, Paul, and Mary, and all those great groups from that era. And I also started listening to radio. My dad worked for Western Electric, part of what no longer around, but Western Electric. He was an electrical engineer, and he came home from work one day. I think I was in about 5th or 6th grade, and he showed me this little electronic thing. I didn't know what it was. And he said, "This is going to change the world." It was a transistor. And then for Christmas, I got a transistor radio.
Okay.
And
wow.
if I was supposed to be in bed at 9 o'clock or whatever, I had that radio under my pillow, and I was listening to AM, WLS, and WCFL. And they were booming 100,000 watt stations. They boomed throughout the Midwest. So powerful stations. And if you had a record on there, it was going to be a hit. So, yeah, I was listening to I started really heavy listening to the radio probably when I was in 6th grade. So it was in the 60s, and the Beatles were certainly not out yet, but loving all that music from the 50s and 60s. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm a few years younger than you, but I can remember with my transistor doing the same thing. My parents would say, "All right, turn it off," and as soon as they were gone, I would turn it up a little bit where I knew they couldn't hear it. But I remember in '69 hearing, you mentioned uh, Peter, Paul, and Mary leaving on a jet plane. I remember they got a lot of rotation. And
Yeah.
also Something, the Beatles, I remember hearing that one and loving both of them,
Yeah.
So that
And
was
Leaving on a Jet Plane, written by,
John Denver.
John Denver. Yeah.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And I like his version too. I have
Yeah.
that on collection. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah.
Well, how about, can you remember one of the first 45s or albums that you bought?
Hmm. Wow. Let's see. I remember one of the first singles I bought was, oh, I got to, man, I should know that off the top of my head. If I counted albums, the ones my dad let me buy were all folk music.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
God, I had the Peter, Paul, and Mary album. I played their live album. I think it was a double album, but it was a great album. I played it over and over and over.
Yeah.
Probably one of the early Beach Boy albums would have been the
Okay.
first album I bought. And that's where I learned to sing falsetto. I
Okay.
would sing along. I had my own bedroom after my sister moved out of the house. I got the bedroom upstairs, and it was like my own little apartment with a little bathroom,
Yeah.
and I had this. And came out. I grew up in a bungalow in Berwyn. I'm a typical Chicagoland bungalow, and my dad built this great bedroom on the second floor for my sister. She moves out. I get to move up to the attic and live in that room.
Yeah.
And so I had my own little stereo there, and I would play the Beach Boys over and over. And that's really what taught me to sing harmony, because I would learn to sing all the parts in their songs. Going back to the surf music and the car music, like Little Deuce Coupe and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
So one of the Beach Boys albums would have been the first album I bought. First single, well, I'm hard pressed to even think what that was. I bought some weird ones. One of the and then yeah, it had to be the Beach Boys. And then secondly, when the Beatles came out, I bought everything. Everything the Beatles ever did. That was life changing, for so many of us.
Very true. I hear that from people from all over I've talked to. Well, how about the first musical instrument that you learned to play?
Ah, I was forced to play piano. I started when I was 6 years old, and I really didn't like it. But it was, my mom made the right decision. I think it's a great way to learn music because you can visualize the chords.
Yeah.
If you take like a saxophone or a clarinet, there's a bunch of keys but they're just random. They look so crazy. But you look at a piano, and hey, it's the black and white keys. The black keys are your flats and your sharps, and the white keys are your whole, the regular notes, the natural notes, and then you've got 12 keys in every octave, and they're the same. They look, and so in terms of music theory, it's a great way to learn. And I learned to read music, and it's difficult because you got to know both hands. One hand doing something different than the other.
Right.
But I decided I did that for a few years, but I never really enjoyed it. But once I think we started grade school band in maybe fourth grade or fifth grade, and I played clarinet. Because my father, we had a clarinet, so we didn't have to buy an instrument. So I was, okay, again, forced to play clarinet, but I loved it. And the difference was playing in a group rather than solo. And
Yeah.
it was two things. First of all, even though all the kids were bad, we were all terrible, you put us together and it sounded pretty good.
It sounds good.
They out of the key, but we had the volume going for us, Uh,
Yeah.
and and then there was number two was the camaraderie and the competition. If you wanted to move up to get a first chair, you had to be better than the person in front of you. And so that competitiveness, I enjoyed that. I thought, well, I can do this. And so I practiced and I practiced and I practiced. And so I really did enjoy that. And it was, and then as the kids grew older, the band got progressively better. And fortunately, we had a great grade school band system, a great feeder program for the high school, who also had, we're blessed with great conductors who challenged the high school band. And we were playing pretty sophisticated music in band all the way up from grade school to high school. And so that was my musical background, piano, then clarinet. Never made any money playing either of those instruments. But what I really loved was going back to the records. When I saw, let's say, the Kingston Trio or somebody like that on television, the Ed Sullivan Show.
Yeah.
And I saw those guys standing there with guitars playing and singing. That was what I wanted to do. I wanted to play guitar and be in a band like that and be able to sing and play guitar.
Yeah.
And so now moving forward to high school, between freshman and sophomore year, when I got that call from Larry Millas saying, you want to join my band? I said, yeah, sign me up. And how did I get the guitar? Why did he call me?
Yeah.
Well, having seen all these people on TV playing acoustic guitars, I wanted an acoustic guitar. I wanted to be like those guys on TV. And I begged my parents. I was a good kid, and I was playing my clarinet and doing what they told me to do. So I begged them and begged them and begged them for a guitar. So I don't know if you are old enough to remember S&H green stamps.
Yes, I
This
remember.
is back when the gas stations and the grocery stores, their promotion was they give you these stamps, and you collected the stamps, and then you could, through this catalog, you could go to the store and redeem your stamps for prizes. My mother got my guitar with S&H green stamps.
Oh, did she? Okay.
It was the worst guitar. The neck was bowed. The strings were off the fretboard by an inch, or 3/4 of an inch. And I bought myself a Mel Bay chord book. So I self-taught, put your fingers here on the fretboard and all of a sudden I'm playing chords. But the guitar was horrible. What I was learning, I was absolutely learning. And I developed a very strong left hand playing that guitar.
Having to grip it. Yeah, exactly. Well, the thing, I know we collected those, but I don't think we collected enough to redeem them for anything. I don't think we were that dedicated to collecting those. But I remember
my mother was my parents lived through the Depression, so they saved those stamps, and we got all kinds of stuff with it. But that was my big deal was getting that guitar. And so Larry knew I had a guitar and I knew some chords, and that was my resume to get in the band.
Okay. Well,
talk about, but it got me in.
The other members, were all you guys pretty much into the same kind of music, or what were their influences, if you can remember?
Interestingly enough, and I didn't realize it till many years later, of all four of us were the baby of the family. We were the youngest of the family. Okay. And so we all grew up listening to our family's music. In Jim's case, he had two older sisters, and they were in the 50s, and he was hearing Elvis Presley and all this rock and roll. My sister was 15 years older than me, moved out, so I never really got her music, but I had my father to thank for that. Larry had an older brother Mike had two older sisters, same thing, listening to rock and roll in the 50s. So that must have had an influence on all of us, having older siblings and hearing this music. So I guess, did we all have the same influences? Yeah. And it was a lot of what we heard on the radio from the 50s and 60s. And so the idea was that we were going to be a band, but we really didn't have any direction, except we wanted to work. And if you wanted to work and get out there and play, you had to be a cover band. And so we started learning those songs we heard on the radio. None of us really read guitar music or anything like that. We just had a knack, particularly Jim, for chord structure and that sort of thing, and figuring songs out. And we listen to the record and listen to the record and figure out the song. And then we'd be able to go to, we, you know, eventually very quickly got our first gig, and you know, you played the covers. So
Yeah.
it took it from there.
Well, you guys originally were called the Shondells.
Yes.
Who came up with that?
Jim came up with the name, and it was there was a pretty famous singer in England, Troy Shondell, and there were a lot of you know, the Delphonics. There was well, even going back before that, there were the bands with Dell in the name, and I don't know the particular attraction, but we needed a name, and that sounded pretty good. The Shondells, and it was very, very, very 60s in that era. So we started out as the Shondells, and we were building a rep. You know, we're getting a reputation, and we're getting gigs. I got to go back to the first gig, though. Do I remember that? Of course.
Yes.
So we started the band during summer vacation from school, and that fall, somebody knew one of our moms, and there was going to be a dance at the American Legion Hall in Berwyn. And so they hired us. Nobody ever auditioned us or knew if we could play anything, but we got a gig. And it was in the basement, the lower level. And this is the days where sock hops were a big thing, and they charge a couple bucks to get in and pay the band peanuts, and
Yeah.
they'd make a little bit of money. So we played a sock hop in the basement of the American Legion, and we got 20 bucks, and no, not a piece, $5 a piece.
Okay.
And that's it. Started from there. And honest to goodness, I still have the original accounting journal from those days. And I have it. I've got the provenance of our first gigs for the first roughly 2 years of our career and how much we were getting paid.
Yeah.
And so, but it started out from that humble beginning, and then it's just word of mouth. And then we started getting hired for you know, at the high school for dances, and other high schools for dances. And all of a sudden we're making 200 bucks a gig. So now it's $50. Well, that, to me, it was better than working at McDonald's for,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
and we were having fun.
Yeah.
And our parents, I have to say, our parents were super supportive. We couldn't drive yet.
Yeah.
We were all, Jim was 13, I was 14. Mike was the oldest, but he didn't have a license yet. So our parents had to drive us to the gigs in the station wagon, and helped us lug the amps. We would play, when we played at bars, we were underage, but they trusted us. Often they just dropped us off and came and picked us up at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
They were that trusting of us, but that's where you build your chops, you know, is going out there and working in front of an audience, seeing what works and doesn't work. And those were our humble beginnings. But we learned to survive through no matter how bad the conditions were, be it the sound system, be it something going wrong with an amplifier. you learn how to handle things, and we did. And we grew up real quick
Yeah, I
learning
was
those
saying,
things as
you could,
musicians. So it was a
you
great basis. Yeah, it was a
you
good
adapt.
way, good way. And there were a lot of clubs in Chicago back then. I can't speak for other cities, but the music scene in
Yeah,
Chicago back in 64 to the early 70s, there were a
yeah,
lot of clubs, specifically for music that you didn't have to be 21 to get in.
yeah,
It was specifically geared for kids. Um, Places that the most famous maybe in Chicago was the Cellar. There was also the Kinetic Playground, and then there were teen clubs like the Pink Fink and the Green Gorilla. Those are real names of clubs.
real name.
There was a DJ in Chicago by the name of Dex Card, great radio
Uh,
name, Dex
yeah,
Card, who had a chain, I'll call it, of clubs. He didn't own it. He would rent the space, charge like $2, $3 to get in, pay the band $500, get a couple, literally get 1,000 to 2,000 kids, and he was making a fortune on the side doing this on Saturday nights. And they were called the Wild Goose, but it gave us the circuit of clubs, allowed us to be out there playing every single weekend.
right.
And then the high school dances and things like that. So there were plenty of opportunities to learn to be better musicians and work things out.
Right. Like you said, you were honing your craft. You know, I, I'm making the rounds. I tell you guys, because I've talked to uh, Curtis Bachman from the Buckinghams. I talked to Tom Duty,
Sure.
uh,
Brian James.
and right, and then more recently Ray Graffia
Mhm.
Jr. with New
New
Colony
Colony
Six.
Six.
Well, I said I'm making the Chicago rounds now. Once I'm done with Chicago, I got to move to another city. And
Ah,
start talking to. But anyhow, in a couple of years later, in '66, you decided the band needed a new name.
well, it wasn't by choice. It was 66. You're absolutely correct. Um, we had built our reputation as the Shondells, and we were getting work, and we were having fun, um, playing gigs. And by that time, we had our driver's licenses, so now we're driving to the gigs ourselves. And we had just been signed to Parrot Records, which is a subsidiary of London Records, an English label, and it had all English acts. But we were on Parrot Records. Most notably, the Zombies were on Parrot.
Right.
Tom Jones was on Parrot.
Yeah.
And here's these kids from Berwyn, Illinois, still in high school on Parrot. So we hit our the record you mentioned earlier, You Wouldn't Listen,
Yeah.
came out, and we had actually got to go to a real studio and record it. And the promo department somehow got it on WLS and WCFL in Chicago. So for the first time, we've got a record on the air.
Yeah.
At the same time, Tommy James and the Shondells come out with their first hit, Hanky Panky.
Okay. Okay.
It
Right.
was literally the same time. And I have charts from back then.
Yeah.
Tommy James and the Shondells are on there, and You Wouldn't Listen is on there. So we quickly had to come up with a new name.
Okay.
We had, for the first time in our lives, we had a manager, and Batman was on TV. And he thought it'd be a great idea to play off of that. And so for about 3 weeks, we were Batman and the Boy Wonders.
Okay.
And we absolutely hated it. And even though we were only 15 and 16 years old, we revolted. We said,
Right.
we don't like that name. It was not cool at all.
No, it wasn't.
The band Batman and the Boy Wonders. So we needed to come up with what we thought would be a cooler name. And so we were, we were brainstorming every time we were together all day long, trying to come up with the right name. And I was sitting in high school English lit, and we're reading Julius Caesar. And I came across the expression said by the soothsayer, beware the Ides of March, that the word said to Julius Caesar the day before he's murdered, assassinated. And I said, beware the Ides of March. Why don't we call ourselves the Ides of March? The guys loved it. Yeah. And it sounded cool. It sounded certainly sophisticated. And a lot of people wouldn't know what it meant, and that's okay. You know, that's kind of cool.
Right.
You have to figure it out.
Right.
And
it almost sounded British. It almost sounded British too.
Yeah. Which was part of the thing being on London Records. I mean, okay, Shakespeare's English, and okay, but we just let that phrase had a ring to it. Two of us were born in March. You know, it just sounded really cool and awesome. Yeah. My advice to any band looking for a name is go into literature, find a good book, take the title, find a phrase in there, and use it for your band. But number one, pick a great author like Shakespeare. Number two, make sure they're dead so they can't sue you.
Sue you.
So we had a few centuries between his death and us plagiarizing Shakespeare. So if you're going to plagiarize the best, and we did that. And I have to say, the name has held up very well for us for decades now. A lot of people still don't know what it means. One of the more recent stories, we've played on several rock and roll cruises where there's other bands and that sort of thing. And we had the beach day, and we weren't working that day, and so we all went off to the beach, and Jim was by himself, and he gets off the ship, and some lady that was also on the cruise, and she says, "Oh, I know you. You're in the March of Dimes." We've been called the Ideas of March. We've been called March of Dimes, you name it, but it's the Ides of March.
Yeah, the March of Dimes. I hadn't heard that one. That's funny. Oh my God.
That's where it was out of panic that we needed a new name, and that's where and so I have surveys with Tommy James and the Shondells, #1 in Chicago, and we're #7, but we're the Ides of March.
The Ides of March. There you go. Yeah.
You would listen, hit number 42 nationally. It was, like I said, hit #7 on the Silver Dollar survey of WLS. And that was a big deal if you were in the top 10 on WLS. And other stations around the country were picking it up. It was a big hit down in Florida. And so that was the first time we went really out of state. I mean, beyond the Midwest. But it also got us out of Chicago. I mean, we were playing in Wisconsin a lot, Indiana, Michigan, Iowa. But then we were still in high school. We had our first road trip to Florida. So quite an adventure for being, 15 and 16 years old.
For being that young. Can you remember where you were when you first heard it on the radio? You wouldn't listen.
I don't actually remember the first time I heard that, but I have a story when I heard Vehicle for the first time. Yeah.
Okay.
When we get to 1970. Yeah.
When we get up there, I want to hear that. Well, the song did get a lot of airplay, and it helped gain a little momentum for you guys. And then 2 years later, a brass section was added. And you played tenor sax for the brass tracks, not the brass tacks. Okay.
Yes.
I want to make sure that distinguish between those. But now around this same time, I don't know which came first. It's like the chicken or the egg. Both Chicago Transit Authority and Blood, Sweat, and Tears were getting together. They were coming together with the brass sections too. So is there any contention, or has there been over the years, who began that first?
No, I think we started using brass. First of all, Jim's main instrument was tenor sax.
Okay.
And so when we were in grade school and high school band, he played tenor sax, not guitar. There was no guitar in band. My main instrument, as I said earlier, was clarinet, and easy enough to double on saxophone. If you're gonna, that's a natural double for a clarinet player. And Jim was a great saxophone player. That said, we started doing, a lot of it was born of hits of the era that were either, well, let's say Wilson Pickett, Sam and Dave, that had brass sections on them.
Right.
You know, and so it was really born of rhythm and blues, and you know, that influence. And being from Chicago, we had a lot of R&B influences. So we started, when we did covers, we had either Jim would play sax or I would play sax. We didn't have a horn section, but Larry played guitar, I'd play bass. We could handle things so that Jim would be up front singing and playing saxophone.
Right.
And even going back, Tequila with a saxophone lead. Yeah, which Pee Wee Herman gave second life to.
Made famous. Yeah.
Exactly. Gave that song a second life. But we played Tequila back in the 60s. So we always had like brass. We have a brass section that said that was about 68, and we were just mixing things up. And it was all about, the same time that BS&T was coming along, and Chicago was in Chicago, hadn't moved out to Los Angeles yet. So, who started first? We were doing it, but not with a brass section. We were doing it with a lead sax or a saxophone player in the band. And then we had some other guys from high school we brought in and said, hey, you play trombone, you play trumpet, da-da-da. And these were literally guys from our high school that were in our brass section. And we liked the sound, and we're kind of mixing up half brass, half without brass. And we were riding on the coattails of You Wouldn't Listen being a hit and getting gigs. And instead of getting, $500 a night, now we're getting $1,500 a night. And back in the 60s, that was great money.
That was a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots.
Yeah. So we were
really,
now we're in college. All of us were in college and doing it on weekends and traveling. And we had been dropped from Parrot Records. We had fired the manager, and I guess this is the next step. It was 68, 69, and like just playing and making some money. We had a booking agent though. We kept our booking agent. And we get a call one day from our agent, and he says, I'd like to have a meeting with you guys. So the four of us went downtown, Chicago, and literally thinking he was dropping us. And so we were very nervous, what's going to happen not next. And well, the meeting was that he had met two fellas in the music business. They were both promotional representatives. One was with Columbia and one was with Warner Brothers, the two big labels.
Yeah.
And they wanted to do more than just work for the record company. They wanted to become record producers and managers. And he said, our booking agent said to us, of all the bands I have on the roster, you're the one that everybody raves about, and they want to book you again. Nobody ever complains about you in any way, that you're easy to work with, and that the shows are always great. The crowd always loves you. So I'm recommending that that you meet with these two guys and see what happens. And instead of getting fired, all of a sudden we're like, wow, this is an opportunity, you know.
Right.
So that was the next step. And lo and behold, I mean, I'll make a long story short. We got signed to Warner Brothers.
Yeah. Yeah.
We did have another label in between with one single release, but that was KAPP Records.
Oh,
But
yeah.
so Warner Brothers gave us actually gave us the funding to do a demo, to do 4 demos. And of the 4 demos that we went into CBS Studios in Chicago and recorded the 4 demos, Vehicle was the 4th one. And it was kind of a throw-in. We knew it was good, but we didn't think it was great. But we knew that crowds, when we played it live, it seemed to, nobody ever heard on the radio yet, but we were playing it live. Yeah. And it had that great brass line in it. Da, 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 da. And, you know, we knew the crowds liked it live, but that doesn't mean anything. You know, that's not a test market. So we put it on the demo, and Warner Brothers came back and said, that's a hit.
Yeah.
They recognized it. And so we went back in and recorded that single for Warner Brothers, and they released it in 1970. And when it came out, it was at that time the fastest rising single they ever had on Billboard.
Yeah.
And Warner Brothers had so many great bands. And yet the little engine that could, Vehicle, was just, and so now I haven't heard one of we had a modest hit in 66, you wouldn't listen, for number 42. We had another song that charted in Chicago, got up to 17, that was called Roller Coaster. And then we did a bunch of other singles for Parrot, but they didn't do anything. They were stiffs. So I hadn't heard a record of ours on the radio since 67. So 68, 69. And I am on my way driving to college. And I've got my girlfriend in the car. We're going back to school. I had played a gig that, you know, on Saturday night. We're going back to school on Sunday. And it was roughly a 60-mile drive to Northern Illinois University, where I went to college. And all of a sudden, the DJ says, and here's the new one by the Ides of March, Vehicle. Ba-da-ba-ba-da. I literally almost drove off the road. My girlfriend, who was my girlfriend for like 3 years at that point, knew the history of the band. Yeah. I had to pull off. So I pulled off the road, and we both started crying. I couldn't believe it. Tears of joy. Yeah. And it sounded great on the AM radio.
Yeah, right.
You didn't have the FM radio in the car. But it really sounded good. And then as I said, it just skyrocketed up the charts. And our agent was still the same agent that believed in us, and he was still booking us. And now all of a sudden, now we're, you know, the world is our oyster. We're playing all over. It's the 70s, and you know, the opportunities were terrific. We had so many adventures, and we were road warriors. We became road warriors. We're on the road constantly.
I wanted to ask you about the song Vehicle. Sure. Was the theme from that ever used as music for football highlights? You know, it sounds like the kind of song, you know, like when you're watching some of those old highlights, NFL films.
Yeah, you know, sure.
It sounds like
I don't think it was. I don't know that it was ever used in that way, but it certainly has become a theme used by marching bands.
Oh, right, right.
So here's a story. I'm going to roll forward. My son Christopher is in high school, and
Yeah.
he's in marching band playing clarinet just like his dad did. And so this would be, let's see, 1908. I got to do the math real quick. This would have been about 1995. And he's in band, and he's going into his junior year, and it's marching band practice. And he comes home. They have a new band director, and he comes home and he says, "Dad, you're not going to believe the new director just passed out the sheet music today. You're never going to believe what he handed out. Vehicle." At that very moment, I knew the song's got legs forever, right?
Right.
I knew then it's a classic if my son, 25 years later, is coming back from a marching band practice with
Right.
the sheet music of the song I played on. And I happen to play sax on that.
Yeah,
So he said, "I told my band director that you were you were in the Ides of March and you played on the record, and he doesn't believe me." So I sent the kid back to marching band practice the next day with the album to show there's my picture on the back of it. That's my dad.
Yeah.
So like I said, that eventually Jim and I fronted the high school band at their sit down concert at the end of the season. And we played Vehicle with the kids, a 200 piece marching band. And it was pretty damn cool.
The song did real well.
Vehicle has been in, Sylvester Stallone used it in his movie Lock Up.
Yeah.
And it's been in several. Eddie Murphy has it in one of his more recent movies. It's been in on Ozark, the TV show, The Shy on HBO. It's been in all kinds of that. Maybe the most it's ever been used. I mean, played was in 2001. It was the music for all the General Motors commercials for a year.
Yeah.
And to the point that we were tired of hearing it. It was on all the time. And so we had Chevy, Buick, Pontiac, not that they're Oldsmobile, that they weren't around anymore, but we had all of them except Cadillac. And you know who got the Cadillac commercial that year was Led Zeppelin. The first time they ever licensed a song was Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin. And they had Cadillac trying to appeal to a more youthful audience.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, let's segue into that with Zeppelin. You brought up Led Zeppelin. You guys did tour North America in 70, supporting Zeppelin. What happened in Winnipeg when you supported
I can't say we supported them. We were on the Festival Express that went across Canada, the train. Okay. We were on the last leg of the tour, which was in Winnipeg. And we were blessed to be on that bill. The day we were supposed to play, it was to be at an outdoor stadium, and it rained, apparently real bad storm. So they, at the last minute, had to move it indoor to their hockey rink, which was all cement floor because it's summer, right? There's no hockey. And super echoey, concrete everywhere, the worst acoustics in the world. Okay. So we're on the bill. There were 4 bands, and it was Led Zeppelin was headlining. It was us. It was, oh man, I can't remember. Inagata-Devita.
Iron Butterfly.
Thank you, Iron Butterfly, and Colin, his last name, the other band. Any rate, 4 bands. And we were right before Zeppelin. And the place was packed, just jam-packed, 15,000 people or whatever. And we did our usual show. and we were veterans at that point. I mean, we'd been working together since '64, and now it's 1970, and we've got this big hit record, and Zeppelin is huge, and I'm all excited to see Zeppelin, and I got to stand on the side of the stage and watch these guys, and we're blown away. And we knew we had a good night, but we didn't know how good it really was. The newspaper comes out the next morning and says the Ides of March blow Led Zeppelin off the stage. And like, we heard about this through our agent. We do have the headlines. We have that newspaper in our collection. And the review was that everybody loved us. And I thought Zeppelin was absolutely phenomenal. But we were so used to, I think part of it was nothing fazed us.
Yeah.
If you look back at our roots,
right,
when you're playing bars and you're playing sock hops and you have the worst sound systems in the world, you don't care. If everything's shitty, you're still going to get up there and do your job. Right. And we did. We didn't care. Nothing fazed us. Nothing got in our way. And maybe they were more impacted by the bad acoustics or something like that, and their songs didn't come off as well. I don't know. But we had a great night. And for some reason, the reviews were terrific. And it's Winnipeg. And who was in the audience that night but Randy Bachman?
Oh, okay.
Years later, from Winnipeg.
Right.
Years later, the story goes, Jim Peterik runs into Randy Bachman. This is post-Survivor and everything else Jim has done in his career. And Randy Bachman says, "Hey, I saw you guys with Led Zeppelin in Winnipeg in 1970. And Jim says, "Is it true?" It would, he said, "You guys were great." He said, "You did blow Led Zeppelin off the stage." And so that was pretty comforting.
Right.
You hear that.
To hear it from a fellow musician too, like that, to hear it. Yeah. That really meant something, right?
Yeah.
Right. Kind of drove that point home.
Yeah. Wow. And actually, when You Wouldn't Listen peaked, it was #1 in Cashbox, #2 in Billboard. What was the #1 song? American Woman by the Guess Who.
Oh, Guess Who? Okay.
That was we were #2 to their #1. Yeah. That's not bad company. We'll take that. Every day of the week, I'll take that. So
I would too. Too.
You know what else was in the top 10 that week? Let It Be by the Beatles.
Oh. Wow.
It was if you look back at that survey, and I have the Billboard, I have a couple copies of the Billboard from that week. It's the Jackson 5 are in the top 10. Simon Garfunkel are in the top 10. Creedence Clearwater Revival's in the top 10. Yeah, right. So to be in that company, even for a week, it's pretty damn cool.
That's not bad company at all. Not bad at all. Well, moving ahead to 71, LA Goodbye from the album Common Bond did fairly well.
Yeah.
Not as good as, Vehicle, of course, but it would be the band's last single.
Yeah. It was LA Goodbye was Common Bond was our second album on Warner Brothers. Yeah. And it was written when we were out in LA after Vehicle, and it was we always loved to sing. I mean, loved singing harmony and that sort of thing. That doesn't get shown off so much on Vehicle, but we love to sing, and so it was acoustic based, and really born of being out of town and on the road all the time. So the title "LA Goodbye" was it was really like we're stuck out in California, and it's great, but we can't wait to get home. And so in Chicago it hit #1. It was #1 for several weeks. And was very popular. And to a lot of folks in the Midwest, LA Goodbye is their favorite song by the Ides of March. And we can't get away with not doing that song every time we play.
Right.
And
Right.
so, yeah, it was, I love that song. I love everything about it, the production, the vocals, my bass part on that. It's just put together, crafted very, very, very well. And brings back a lot of great memories to a lot of folks from that era.
From that era, yeah. Yeah. All the elements come together really nicely on that track. You're right. You're right. Well, from the third album, 1972's World Woven,
yeah,
keyboardist David Arellano was added to the band, and the band moved away from the brass sound.
Exactly. We made the switch from Warner Brothers to RCA. RCA signed us, and they let us move in another direction. And brass was fading away. We were a little tired of it, and we still had to play vehicle every gig, right? But we just started experimenting, doing different things. We were, in a lot of ways, we're trying all different kinds of things, and that was the first time we had a full-time keyboard player. We on the road, we carried a B3 in our truck. We hauled a Hammond B3 around the country and lugged it up. We had crews lugging it upstairs and anywhere with us. But Larry doubled on organ and keyboards, but it wasn't his main instrument. And we had never had a full-time keyboard player. So Dave Arellano, great piano player, great keyboardist, joined the band and gave us new sounds. Synthesizers were coming into play, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of really cool stuff on that album. Very proud of it. And that was, but it didn't have any, breakout single at all. But there's some really cool music on it that I like. And it was that era of 72. And we were starting to do all kinds of different things, and almost to the point of prog rock. We do extended versions, but going back to the Vehicle album, we did 2 extended versions of songs, particularly Eleanor Rigby. We did like a 10-minute version of Eleanor Rigby, which Paul McCartney complimented us on. It's very different. It's a totally different take. And we actually resurrected that about 10 years ago. One summer when we were on tour, we played Eleanor Rigby at our gigs, and so kind of fun doing that stuff too. So
did you play the 10-minute version live too?
Yeah, we did. But we had to chart it out for ourselves, because we had to go back, listen to our record. Okay, we had different sections that we did, It really did. It's a great song, a great version.
Yeah. Well, it seems like maybe the band was searching for an identity at this point, when 1973's Midnight Oil had more of a country rock feel.
Yeah, we were definitely influenced by what was going on around us. And again, RCA gave us carte blanche. And so our songwriting went in that direction. And we had worked out all these songs in more harmony and that sort of thing. But we were just kind of influenced by what was going on. And we had played with, fortunately got to play with Poco. And
great.
They were awesome band. We just loved them. And it was the same time the Eagles were coming out and that sort of thing. And it turned out we recorded at RCA Studios out in Hollywood, and who was in Studio A was Poco, and we were in Studio B. And so their steel player, who's passed away now, played on 2 of our tracks. Great guys, really nice. And back then, Timothy B. Schmidt was their bass player, the Eagles.
Yes, he was.
Long time. But we hung out with them. The studio was so big, there was a ping pong table in the back of the studio. We played ping pong.
Ping pong.
But it was a lot of fun. So we had a lot of fun recording that album. And actually, we just played a gig up in Michigan, and we we pulled a song off that album we hadn't played in a couple of years called Midnight. No, the album was Hot Water was the name of the song we played off of that album. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So,
Did
yeah,
that
we
get a
still
good
remember
reaction?
some of those songs.
Did that get a good reaction? Do fans
Yeah,
remember that?
it rocks. It really
Yeah.
rocks. So, country rock.
There you go. Well, why did the band go on a hiatus and such a long one at that?
Well, it was number one, we'd been doing it for 10 years. 64, started playing gigs in 64 through 73. That's a 10-year run. Some of us were getting a little road weary. We had ridden the roller coaster of success twice, where we had hit records, got us started with You Wouldn't Listen, got us going, got us our next deal, had 4 albums, and it was time to move on. I had graduated college, and several of us wanted to move on. I knew I wasn't destined to be a musician the rest of my life. That's not what I saw myself doing. Others did. Jim in particular, I couldn't see him doing anything else but being a songwriter and a musician professionally. But I had other plans in life, and the other guys did too. Larry became a recording engineer and a successful one. Mike and I went into business. And so it was a very, very amicable divorce. Nobody was ticked off at each other. We were lifelong friends. And when we sat down and had the heavy discussion, it was, we all kind of wanted to move on with life. And but we wanted to go out the way we came in. And so we decided our last gig would be at the high school where we started.
Or you started, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So we played, it was November of 1973. We packed the gymnasium. It was just mob scene. And that was our last show. And it was a great one. And it was a good way to go out. I have film of it, but with no audio, unfortunately. But I do have some Super 8 film that I've been digitized, and it's very cool to see us on stage. Now all in our 20s and rocking, I wish I had the sound. But that was our last show. We parted as friends and stayed in touch over the years. And then all of a sudden, 17 years goes by and the locusts come out of the trees, tree bark. And out of the blue, we got a call. One of the guys got a call from our hometown, and this was in the era of really big summer festivals. And they said, would you guys consider getting back together and playing our summer festival? And they were drawing thousands of people every night. We'd like you to headline a Saturday night. So the calls went around, and we all said the same thing. I'll do it if everybody else does it.
Yeah, okay, right.
My wife thought I was absolutely nuts because I hadn't played professionally. I'd done a couple things, but I hadn't played professionally in like 15 years. And I thought there's no way Jim's going to do it because he was in Survivor and he had so many hits with them and so many hits for 30 Special. What a career he was having. And why would he want to get together with us schlubs,
Yeah.
But we were still friends, and we all said the same thing. I'll do it if everybody else does it. So now there was no turning back. We agreed to do it.
Yeah.
Well, then it was, we had to knock a lot of rust off. We couldn't, what key is the song in? How did this go? And actually get our chops back up where we, vocal parts and just everything had to come together. But we had 20,000 people at that show, and it was very heartwarming. A lot of work to get ready for it. And so we did that in our hometown of Berwyn outdoors. It was a fabulous Saturday night. And while we were preparing for it, like 6 months in advance of this summer show, another suburb of Chicago heard we were back together doing one concert, and they wanted us to do their concert Labor Day weekend. So we said, well, okay, we're doing all this work for one show. We might as well do two. And that's what started it. We did two shows that summer. The next summer, we did six, or I don't know what, but we never stopped. We got back together. We had so much fun. And I remember saying to Jim, after all the success he had with Survivor and his songwriting and everything else, I remember saying to him, why are you doing this with us? He said, his words to me were, you don't know how good you are. And that's all I needed to hear from a guy with that much talent. And we all, leaned, just like when we were kids, we learned from each other. We relearned our songs. And it was that old camaraderie. It was right back. It never left. It never skipped a beat. Yeah. And so for Jim, it was like getting together with his best friends who happened to be musicians and having a good time and playing. It was never about money. It was always, when we started as kids, it was never about money. It was about music and getting some attention, because you weren't the star quarterback of the football team. We had something else going for us. We got up on stage, and we had great pride in our music. We took it very seriously, our entire career to this day. And we still, when we, for instance, we're playing in Hillside, Illinois for an outdoor concert Tuesday night, this coming Tuesday. Yeah. We have a rehearsal Monday morning, 9:30. And rehearsals are just as maybe more fun than the shows. The actual show. It's just great getting together, working on stuff. We're always, learning, recording, doing things that we enjoy, and we love each other's. We now, at this point in our lives, we've all watched our kids grow up together, and it's it is family without a doubt. It's we know each other so well. When you live on the road with guys for, sleeping on mattresses on the floor at a Holiday Inn, night after night after night. When I say on the mat, what we would do when we got the good old Holiday Inns were so big back then. You could get a Holiday Inn in every town. That's where we wound up staying. Well, I think the statute of limitations has run out. So I can say safely, we would put 4 guys in a room to save money. Yeah. And we'd take the mattresses, we'd have the 2 queen size beds and put the 2 mattresses on the floor. And so 2 guys would sleep on the box spring, on the 2 beds, 2 on the box springs, 2 on the mattresses on the floor. So everybody had their own bed. And you do that with a bunch of guys for 3-4 years, you get to know each other pretty well.
You get to know each other. Yeah, that's right.
And if you can put up with that, if you think marriage is hard, living with one person, try living with 4 guys
4 people
on the road.
And you guys save money too, like you said, doing that. Wow. Well, I want to ask you about a couple of the releases after you guys got back together. You did a couple of EPs and a full-length CD, Ideology, with re-recordings of older material plus some new songs. Yeah.
Back in we probably did that in 92-ish or something like that. And we started, Jim, now had, he had written so many great songs in the 80s, and now we're back together and it's the 90s. And he flipped that switch, and the brass sound and our vocals and everything else. So he started writing songs specifically for the Ides of March. And so that's what was born of that, with these new songs that we were recording. And he is such a great songwriter. If people don't know Jim Peterik, all you have to do is look at his website, take a list, look at the list of hits, 18 top 10 hits, with everybody from of course, Survivor, 38 Special, Sammy Hagar, the Beach Boys, in recent years. It just, he writes in so many different styles and can adapt his writing to that band, that he crosses over several genres and does it so well. And he's also a great arranger. And, he lives, breathes, and eats music 24/7. And he's got that curse of a creative mind that you can never turn it off. It's there constantly. There constantly. So
Yeah.
I got used to Jim long ago. You'd be sitting there, you'd be having a conversation. He always had a notebook, and all of a sudden he'd write something down. It would be something you said that he thought might be a good song title or an idea for a song. He was always looking for the those little things that turn into, believe it or not, a song.
Right.
And sometimes a hit record. So yeah, remarkable.
Nuggets, yeah, like that. Well, yeah, that's then in 2003, the band released a double live CD, Beware, the Ides of
Yeah,
March live. Yeah.
yeah.
Do you think that
Double
captured
live.
the live sound? You think it captured it pretty
Yeah,
well?
it was great. That was done at a great auditorium, at College of DuPage in Chicago, community college. And now we've been back together for 3 years, 4 years. And so the band was pretty tight again. And we decided we had never done a live album. So that was our first foray into that. And frankly, that I would say, since we've gotten back together in 90, that's probably has sold the most units of anything we've done since 1990. It's been
Yeah.
very popular, and it really captures our spirit. But boy, since then, we still are recording and that sort of thing. But that was a great evening. Great evening.
Great show. And then in two years later, 2005, the compilation, Ides Essentials. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
like that. I like that title.
Yeah, because then we took everything that we've been doing and put it together in a compilation,
Yeah.
and that worked out real well. And that was about the time Rhino Records released a compilation of everything we recorded for Warner Brothers, not the RCA stuff,
Yeah.
but everything we did for Warner Brothers. And they put together a special, it was a 2 discs, but it had this great booklet in it. It was like, I don't know, 16 pages or something, with pictures from that era, and a great history of the band. And it was beautiful. And we had nothing to do with it. I mean, really, I don't recall being interviewed for it or anything like that. Rhino came out with it. They only printed 1,000 copies of it. And I'm lucky to have, I think, two left in my collection. But they're really just a great compilation. They remastered everything. It sounds great.
Oh,
And so that's you have to hunt for that one, because they were numbered too, 1 through 1,000.
oh,
So yeah, it's a very cool compilation, another compilation.
right. I love the compilations, like you said, with a lot of the history and the liner notes and those kind of things in there, and the pictures of photos too, like you said. Yeah. Well, what started the Cornerstones of Rock show on public broadcasting?
Well, WTTW is the PBS station in Chicago, quite large. And we were contacted by a producer from WTTW, who, being a Chicago-based station, knew of all the great bands that came out of Chicago. And in the early days, really the 60s, not counting the band Chicago or CTA, who was a little bit later. This is like the formative years of rock and roll, when it was bands like the Buckinghams, the New Colony Six, the Crying Shames, the Ides of March, that were making a name for themselves. And they wanted to memorialize what happened in Chicago at the time and pay tribute to those bands, primarily that came out of Chicago. Although, and they were honing in on the concept back then was bands that were born of started out in garages playing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was called it wasn't a show about the Ides of March. It was the Cornerstones of Rock dash American Garage. And one of the best bands from that era that was just a couple years older than us was Jimmy Sands and the Shadows of Night. The biggest hit was Gloria, #1, which was a song by Van Morrison, big hit by Van Morrison and them in England. And their manager said, record it here, and let's make it a hit. It was a hit, huge hit. So Jimmy Sands did it. He was the lead singer. New County 6 came out of Chicago. We had oh my goodness, the Crying Shames, who had a big hit with Sugar and Spice, and a couple Columbia albums that were terrific. And we knew all these guys, Buckingham's. We knew all of these guys. We grew up with them. We were competitors of theirs back then.
Right.
We were all playing the same circuit. When I say competitors, well, there were plenty of places to play. We were all getting work. We were all building our chops.
Right.
But we all had hit records along the way.
Right.
And it was just a very interesting era in music, that period between 66 and 70. So they put together this show, and all those bands appeared, and we recorded songs. They put the show together, and they ran it in Chicago. It was a huge pledge drive for them. The PBS pledge drive. So the show went from Chicago, it went national, and they used it to raise money with their pledge drive and that sort of thing. And then we recorded it they had a great studio theater that we recorded at, in high def. And so we have that on video that we sell up, get our website, and still available. And it has a companion piece with the original recordings on it, some of which we do on the show. But it's really an homage to American Garage, not just Chicago. It just happened to feature a lot of Chicago bands on it.
Right.
So, and then that was the seed that grew into the tree that is now a live show called Cornerstones of Rock.
Right.
And we do several shows a year together, and it does include the Buckinghams, the Ides of March, the New County 6, and the Crying Shames. And now that Jimmy Sands has passed, we do a tribute to Jimmy, usually do Gloria and a couple of his other songs. And if you grew up in that era, you grew up with those songs. It's the story of your life. And the reaction's always great. We've done it in Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan. So it's very big in the Midwest, which is exactly the club circuit we played back in 1968.
Right.
Yeah.
Ray Graffia said this. He said, you guys were competitors, back in the day,
Sure. Yeah.
So it was like you couldn't really like the other guys, because they're your competition. He said that's a lot. He said once he's got to know you guys, we could have been great friends the whole time, back in the day,
Yeah.
And he said, but of course, unfortunately, you were competition, for him, but
well, it's kind of funny. Yeah, we're all grown up now. Everybody's now we're grown up. So there's the egos are left at the door.
Right.
And the blessing is that we're still able to do this. I have to say that the four of us in the Ides of March, who I'm asked every once in a while, people say, "Oh, did you realize when you were 16 that you'd be doing this when you're 70. No, of course not. I mean, when you're 16, you're thinking about tomorrow, and you're not even thinking a week ahead. You're just worried about the next math class that you didn't study for. The next test you didn't study for, let
Yeah.
alone playing in a rock band for how long are you going to do this? You don't have a plan of life.
No.
And then to think that these bands, and especially the original voices on the records, are out there singing these songs and can still do it. Most of and especially men say to us when they come through the merch line to get autographs and buy the albums at the end of the show, so often they will say to us, "You are so lucky that you can do this. I wish I could do this." And it's so true. We never forget how blessed we are.
Right.
We know that we are very lucky to be in one piece. And in my case, all original equipment,
Right.
the knees are still working. The arms are still working. The back's okay. It just, you don't recover as quick as you did when you were 20. But yeah, to be able to do it and do it to a high level is a true blessing. You can't do, baseball players and football players, that's great when you're young, but you can't do it forever. You can do music for a long time. So
I know.
we're lucky. Yeah.
Yeah. Looking at, are you a baseball fan?
Yeah.
Okay.
I am.
Looking at the Rangers coach, Texas Rangers, his knees, because he was a catcher,
Oh,
I'm surprised he doesn't need a walker. I mean, when he walks out there, to change pitchers, ooh, he's hobbling. He's really hot, but I'm sure he has a lot of pride too. But
sure. But
just being behind the plate for all, like you said about athletes.
Well, we got the aches and pains from having a 10-pound guitar strapped on our shoulder. It gets to your neck and your back, but it's not the same as getting knocked around and unconscious in a football game.
No, it's not the same thing. When you still have a full head of hair too.
Yeah, it's the real deal.
Yeah.
I started dyeing it gray to look more mature.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I can relate. I've got really thick hair myself, and people tell me they don't think I'll ever go bald. So, that's not a bad thing, I guess.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. It's there. It's real. And I always say, I don't care what color it is. If it's up there, I'm happy about that.
Right. Well, did you want to mention anything about the cruises, the Moody Blues cruise and the Flower Power cruise?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, talk about blessings. Now that now that we've been back together since 1990, we can't believe it's been that long. But still with the original four guys, and then Scott, our keyboardist, interestingly enough, he's not just our keyboardist, he's a fabulous keyboardist, and he's also the artist rep for Hammond in the USA.
Okay.
So he knows like everybody in the music business, and he's a master at creating sounds for Hammond. He does a lot of the technical work. That's our keyboard player. He happened to go to our high school too, although he was 4 or 5 years younger than us behind it, but he was a fan of the Ides of March back in the 60s.
Yeah.
So we asked him to join the band in 1990. When we got back together, we wanted a full-time keyboard player. So Scott's been with us since 1990. So that's 5 guys together, which is, the 4 guys being the same in a band with a hit record. There was a study done by the Chicago Tribune years ago. They did an article on us that no other band has 4 original members with a top 10 song that's still together. That's us.
Yeah.
And then Scott's been with us since 1990. And then we have this great horn section, great musicians, college educated guys that are our age that are really great horn players. Trombone, sax, and trumpet. Bim Bales on trumpet, Steve Eisen on sax, and Henry Salgado on trombone. And, these have been this has been our band now for like ever.
Yeah.
It seems like forever, and we love doing it. And we get to play, we're probably doing about 24 gigs a year, couple a month, averages out. And then to get paid to go on a rock and roll cruise where we're not just a house band. They have all these great bands that join in. So been out with the Moody Blues, we've been out with the Beach Boys and the Flower Power Cruise. This next year, we're going on 2 rock and roll cruises, one at the end of January for a full week, and then another cruise in the middle of March. And they're great because there's music from 10 in the morning till 2 in the morning. And you get to see all these bands. We do meet and greets, and everybody's there to have a good time. And they're not intrusive. That was the first time I went out on one, I thought, am I going to like this? Because I like my private time, my quiet. I don't want to be on all the time, and people are very respectful of your time and your privacy. But they're there to have a good time, and they come out to all the shows, and a couple thousand people. So it's a lot of fun and a lot of great acts. So if you look at our website, it has Princess Cruises at the end of January, and we're on the Rock and Romance cruise in March, mid-March. So you can link into their websites and see who else is on those, but it's a lot of fun. So
It sounds like
come out and see the Ides of March.
Well, one more question. How is it playing with a 26-piece orchestra backing you?
Oh,
You did that earlier this year.
yeah. During the pandemic, when everybody was, twiddling their thumbs, we would still get together and rehearse from time to time, with the masks on and all that, trying to be safe. And we were approached by a very good friend of ours, Ed Vodica, who's a jazz pianist and a terrific arranger and writer. And he was looking for a project and suggested to us, how about if I write charts for an orchestra to accompany the hits, including Jim's hits like Eye of the Tiger, The Search Is Over, some of the 38 special hits. And we said, yeah, great. So he charted for an orchestra. We can do a 12-piece, 26-piece, and a 38-piece or something like that. We have charts for all these different instruments, timpani, everything from timpani to viola, violins, flutes. I mean, the whole gamut. So for our real 60th anniversary, March 15th, 2024, we planned a concert here in St. Charles, Illinois, at a concert hall here in beautiful, about 1,000-seat auditorium, and it's sold out, where we played with a 26-piece orchestra. And the conductor was one of our ex-trombone players, who is a retired high school band director now and has his master's in conducting. He conducted the orchestra with the charts that Ed wrote. And we had the orchestra on one side of the stage and we were on the other. So the people had a full view of the orchestra and a full view of us. And it was magical. It was magical. It was very cool. So we've done that show twice. We did it outdoors in Addison, Illinois, a couple of years ago. And then we did this one production here in St. Charles. And it's at the Norris Cultural Arts Center. And it was a huge success. Hope to do it again sometime. But a very special night for us because it was our 60th. And just all our families were there, all the kids that are grown up now with kids of their own. So grandkids and that sort of thing. It's family, and it was something extremely special. But every gig to us is special. Like I said, we were in Michigan a couple of weeks ago. We're going to be in Hillside, Illinois. We're going to be out in Seattle. I should mention that. That's not really just the Ides, but that's Jim's going to be out there. Concert. It's a benefit called Concerts for Cancer. It's at the famous club out there, the Jazz Alley. And if you can get tickets, it's going to feature Ray Parker Jr., Ghostbusters fame, and Radio was his other band. And he used to play guitar for Stevie Wonder. He's a great guy. We've worked with him before. Mindy Aber, the contemporary jazz artist, is the hostess. And David Pack, formerly of Ambrosia, lead singer and writer. David, we've worked with before too. So it's going to be a great show. They're going to do a song and stories, a little bit of that. And then we've got whole band backing them up, doing the nothing but hits that night. Nothing but hits. That's going to be Monday, October 7th in Seattle at Jazz Alley. So that's going to be a big one coming up.
Oh, okay. So any of you fans in that area or people that are willing to travel a little bit, go check that out.
Yeah, very cool.
All right. Well, wow. That's a lot of history there, Bob. And you've been there every minute.
Yeah.
The way
it feels like it some days.
Right. Well, so, continued success.
Thank you, Greg.
With the Ides, sure. And you guys, keep pressing on, okay?
We will. If fans want to see us, our website's The Ides of March. Put the in there. I mean, that's formal name of the band is theidesofmarch.com. And go to our website, and it's got the gigs up there and what we're doing. And it's kind of how you can keep track of us. Okay?
Okay. All the current events, everything upcoming, and all the shows and all that good stuff. Okay. All right. Well, thanks again. Thanks again, Bob, and for sharing and your time and going back in that time machine with me. All right.
It's been enjoyable. Greg. Thank you very much.